The Mildura CBD Access and Mobility Strategy was a key recommendation from the recently adopted new CBD Plan 2020 to 2035. The purpose of this presentation is to provide just a brief outline of the draft strategy that's going out for public comment commencing 8th of August to Friday the 3rd of September, where we're inviting, after 2 rounds of earlier community engagement, this time we're inviting more detailed comments from any interested parties as to what is now being proposed. In the 2 rounds of online key stakeholder workshops, we've invited comment on the key issues and in response to a draft discussion paper that was prepared and presented in May 2021 to gauge some initial response to the kinds of recommendations we are now putting forward. Those recommendations have been informed via 2 rounds of community engagement, plus a number of detailed policy and data analysis investigations conducted over the last 12 months. Your feedback is now invited in terms of what you liked or what you think needs still some improvement or changing in the draft strategy, and anything you think we've missed. A full copy of this presentation, the summary, and the full draft strategy is available on Council's website. The purpose of this video presentation today is just to bring to your attention some of the key highlights of what we're proposing and where we've got these ideas from, whether it's from local feedback, best practice research, locally or indeed internationally, and to summarise some of the key questions we're really keen to invite your comments on. When we talk about CBD access and mobility strategy, we're particularly focusing on 4 dimensions, if you like, of transport. The first dimension is what we might call active transport, basically walking or cycling to get somewhere, including using a mobility scooter or standard variety scooter or skateboard. We're also talking about public transport. Of course, in Mildura, that means catching a bus. And without jumping ahead too quickly, you'll see that we've got some recommendations as to how we could streamline the local bus services to expand the catchment area and serviceability and relevance of the public transport without actually increasing the number of kilometres travelled by the bus routes and therefore not actually adding any cost to the service provision in terms of the cost to operators. Of course, access relates to car parking as well, and we've looked into some detailed analysis of actual utilisation rates of existing car parking resources relative to peak demands and throughout the year and 24-hour timeframe. And of course, the urban environment plays a big role in determining how people choose to get out and about. Yes, Mildura does have a few really hot days at the peak of summer, but of course it's not always like that in beautiful, sunny Mildura. Nonetheless, the extent to which we have what we might call supporting infrastructure that makes people feel safe, as a pedestrian or cyclist in particular, or not. And again, without jumping ahead to some of the key findings from the community survey we ran online in October last year, it's very clear that we need to do much more in improving the supporting infrastructure to make people feel comfortable and safe when riding a bike or walking to and around the CBD. The focus of the Mildura CBD plan was to ensure a high level of comfort, amenity and resilience, both economically and environmentally, as the CBD continues to develop and respond to changing conditions, economic, social or environmental. As part of that, there was a clear recommendation set, or indeed a performance benchmark set in the CBD plan to increase the proportion of people travelling to the CBD via active transport being either walking, cycling, mobility scooter, or ordinary scooter or skateboard, to increase the proportion of active transport by 15% compared to 2016 census data indications. We don't need to focus too much on that now. However, we just ask people to bear in mind that when we enhance walkability and other forms of active transport to the CBD, we, in the process, increase the likelihood of available car parking. If more people happily choose to walk or cycle to the CBD, that's fewer cars taking up precious car parks in the CBD. Formally, you can see before you the study area is just the CBD in Mildura. That's the red box on the left, set within the broader yellow area, which is Mildura as a whole suburb, which of course is the main focus, but certainly does not comprise the whole of the municipality, but in fact is barely a speck. The CBD area covers 7th, Magnolia, San Mateo Avenue, 11th Street and Walnut Avenue. When we talk about active transport, we also apply the term sustainable mobility. What does that mean in terms of sustainability? It means we're making it safer for people to choose other modes of transport than cars or motorbikes. We're reducing our greenhouse emissions. We're also enhancing healthy lifestyles. We're also creating a greater level of vibrancy on the streets because you're more likely to bump into a fellow pedestrian, even getting to know your neighbours and members of the local community. We're also about fostering healthier, more active lifestyles amongst the community, and we're also reducing transport costs because in essence it costs nothing to walk. Certainly, it's part of the broader strategy to create a more conducive, amenable environment to walk or cycle, and that includes shade, a key requirement if we're going to greenhouse emissions and meet our climate emergency challenge. As you can see from this slide, there's a lot of work that's been done over the last 12 months, a lot of detailed local and state policy and data analysis, some key stakeholder feedback and broader community engagement via rounds 1 and 2, stakeholder workshops, community survey, and feedback via other means, including direct email, with key stakeholders who've expressed concerns in the past. We've also had a councillor workshop to ensure the councillors themselves have provided some direct feedback into this project to date. It's not really possible here to summarise all the key findings from all the work we've done over the last 12 months, but the bottom line is Mildura is flat and a relatively small city by regional standards. That makes it very easy to get around, both in terms of topography and travel distance and travel time. Our own consultants have confirmed, by literally getting on their bike, that it really only takes 15 minutes to cycle from 16th Street in San Mateo or thereabouts into the CBD. Most importantly, however, the community survey crystallised for us how important it was to do better in providing safer, more attractive walking and cycle routes into the CBD. At present, we have a distinct lack of supporting infrastructure in this regard, and this clearly is influencing people when they choose how to travel to the CBD. Some key major challenges I won't go into quite so much now, but I encourage you to spend some time looking over this slide, looking down the left-hand column, recognising our current situation does present fairly poor pedestrian amenity and safety. We have some barriers to safe cycling at the moment. We need to improve our public transport, our bus services. We certainly have some challenges with regard to heat and sun during our peak summer months. We certainly also have some challenges with regard to car parking and how we better manage meeting people's needs relative to available actual supply. There's a very limited, narrow time frame in terms of when people really can't get a car park. However, much of our existing car parking we found was not being well utilised, largely because of the time restrictions placed on it. Won't jump into the recommendations just now, but nonetheless, we have rationalised on-street car parking requirements and time zones and off-street provision so that we can better meet people's needs and create less confusion with regard to timing. This is just a snippet, a glimpse, if you will, of some of the recommendations contained in the full report. If you have a look down Deakin Avenue, which is the central spine, you'll see a number of icons that are either black with a green person in the middle or green with a black character in the middle. This is highlighting the need and the intention to lengthen the pedestrian crossing times over Deakin Avenue or to explore a speeded up time cycle so that as people do cross from one direction to the other, they are not left waiting for more than a few seconds in the middle median section. The light green icons also flag an intention to facilitate more convenient mid-block pedestrian crossing points as well. This is already an evident pattern in terms of behaviour right now. It also provides a much more convenient way to get around the CBD than having to walk back or to either end of the intersection and to cross at the existing pedestrian lights. There's a number of other key features we're considering, certainly to improve the pedestrian safety and safe crossing points over 7th Street to the riverfront, and also most particularly to improve and enhance the pedestrian and cycling crossing over side streets along 11th Street. This will include improved pedestrian operated lights at key sections such as Lime Avenue, particularly adjacent to St Joseph's School. Do have a look, spend some time looking through this report. We'd also like to highlight, again, we're recommending some further investigation in terms of improving pedestrian amenity and priority in Feast Street, but please don't misinterpret that icon. No one is suggesting that we are simply extending the mall or something similar. This work will also be subject to another project coming up, a Langtree placemaking project, and all the while we're talking about enhancing car parking, coexistence with pedestrians, and enhancing the overall vibrancy and appeal of this precinct. Note 2, the icons showing an electrical plug, for example, this is indicating where we're recommending a number of new electric vehicle charging points, whether they are within specific car parks off street or curbside streamlined provision. Note 2, we're also still exploring, echoing an objective from the CBD plan, enhancing more shortcut arcades and mid-block crossings through what we call the urban form to make it as efficient and convenient for pedestrians to take shortcuts through the CBD commercial core. We're also seriously considering improving pedestrian crossings at a number of points throughout the CBD to basically just give priority to pedestrians and people in mobility scooters and indeed cyclists over cars at key intersections, which we know are key approach routes into the CBD. There's nothing terribly new or radical about this. A classic example is the safer pedestrian crossing that's already been established at Langtree Avenue, where it crosses 7th Street and takes us down to the riverfront. You can see from this central image that there's a continuation of the footpath level to make it easier for parents with children in prams, etc., while a gentle gradient, a gentle rise is presented to the motorists, as well as a zebra crossing configuration to remind the motorists that they need to give way to pedestrians and cyclists crossing at this point. Various other ideas are being explored, including over here on our right, a micro-mobility lane. This intention is to separate people in scooters or mobility scooters or bikes from pedestrians walking on the actual footpath. It's not a firm proposal, it's an exploration of how we could better utilise road space and optimise safety and comfort for everybody who is trying to get to the CBD, irrespective of the mode of travel. As mentioned before, we have a number of detailed designs and changes proposed for the CBD intersections. For example, these unusual looking black and white circles are the designated prioritised pedestrian crossing points, similar to what I showed you just before, with the raised platform crossing for pedestrians with a zebra crossing, which reminds motorists that they need to down and defer to. This slide might be of particular interest to those who are convinced we need more car parking in the CBD. Certainly, we know we need to better manage demand and supply at peak times. The image on the right represents the actual utilisation rates of car parking in November 2019. This was achieved using satellite data, and be assured these same occupancy rates were monitored for the previous years 2016, 17 and 18, which revealed a consistent pattern. What this tells you when you refer to the legend below is the red squares or the red precincts show where existing car parking is more than 85% utilised already. So pretty much it's fully occupied. The orange sections show where the car parking is distinctly underutilised, perhaps only 41% or less. In particular, for example, where I'm showing you this car park, which is at the rear of the Coles car park and fronts onto Pine Avenue opposite Tilly's Furniture. This is a council-owned car park, and to the left, the southern half of which is currently allocated for 3-hour car parking only and is typically distinctly underutilised. This strategy is actually proposing changing the 3-hour time limit to all day to particularly improve available, conveniently located all-day car parking for those who work in the CBD. A consistent message from both the CBD plan and the CBD Access and Mobility Strategy was that so many staff and shop owners are actually parking right outside the front of their own shops, rather than more sensibly leaving those car spaces for their customers, for the convenience of their customers, and people who are working all day in the CBD could in fact park just perhaps half a block away in a more convenient location to achieve a more of a win-win outcome. Do note too that we are conscious that certainly demand for car parking along 8th Street is particularly high, and in the section, certainly in particular the western side of Deakin Avenue between 8th and 9th Street. At least 2 other council-owned car parks are also fully occupied at present in both Madden and Orange Avenue, as is the other council-owned car park in Pine Avenue between 9th and 10th. So we are looking at various options to enhance available car parking via partnerships with local supermarkets and Kmart car park, to explore the upgrade of existing 2-hour regulated segments of these car parks to all day as well. This is just open for discussion. This slide shows a rationalisation of on-street car parking. And when I say rationalisation, I mean we're proposing to do away with the short-term car parks of 15 minutes or 30 minutes or even 1 hour, because the consistent feedback has been this is just simply not enough time. Not enough time to dine at a civilised pace at your favourite restaurant or cafe, not enough time to catch up with friends for coffee and do a little shopping, etc., or meet an appointment. So to avoid confusion, we thought, and to maximise efficiency, we thought we'd stick with a 2-hour car park for all on-street car parking, and then note the red little car parks and the blue. The red are the loading zones, the blue are disabled zones, and we're aiming to pick up an excellent idea from the city of Warrnambool down there on the coast, whereby after a certain time, such as 11 or 11:30 in the morning, all loading zone car parks double to become disabled car parks as well. I won't go into the details of the design for these car parks, but basically the similar design requirements apply for both vans arriving to do a delivery and particularly the longer vehicles sometimes necessary for people in wheelchairs, etc. So we're trying to increase the availability and predictability of where you're going to be able to find a disabled car park the next time you come to town. Perhaps one of the most significant proposals in the new CBD Access and Mobility Strategy draft for comment is to finally be guided by the evidence. The evidence has been around for almost 2 decades now that 30 kilometres an hour gives you the best chance of surviving any kind of incident with a vehicle if you're a pedestrian. As the data on the left clearly shows, even at 40 kilometres an hour, you've still only got a 50-50 chance of surviving as a pedestrian if you're hit by a vehicle, a motor vehicle travelling at 40 kilometres an hour. Frankly, we don't like those odds. Note, we're only really exploring the idea of slowing down people once you're in the CBD. The 30-kilometre speed limit does not apply, for example, to 11th Street or indeed to San Mateo. Note 2, we've already reduced the speed limit along 7th Street to 40 kilometres an hour without any fuss and a lot of happy ease with the logistics. The areas marked in a dotted line are also areas we're investigating as to whether we should apply the 30 kilometre an hour speed zone to this section of Walnut Avenue, for example, or not. We'd love to hear from you. Importantly, there's been a lot of misinformation about the merit or otherwise of 30 kilometres an hour. The good news is we not only have the United Nations on board, whose road safety theme for this week in April was specifically the Love 30 message, that the evidence was in that 30 kilometres an hour was the optimum speed for everyone to happily coexist. And perhaps it's embarrassing to admit the entire city of Auckland a major capital city in New Zealand, has already introduced this speed limit for their CBD. So it's a little bit embarrassing that the Kiwis have already beaten us to it. What we're trying to do is create maximum amenity and comfort and civility in the CBD as an inspirational, positive experience each and every time you come to the CBD. This slide just briefly highlights the importance of approach routes to the CBD. Our strategy does not at all simply focus on the CBD, but it's also thinking about how we can streamline and improve pedestrian and cycle access en route to the CBD from suburbs further afield. In particular, it's important to note that we already have some great infrastructure in terms of footpaths out there on 16th and 15th Street, but perhaps it's not so great in terms of amenity and shade trees. So there's much more work to do, and we aim to put it as a clear priority in this strategy. We have a couple of ideas for you to consider about how we reallocate space on existing CBD streets. At present, we know that it's really not safe to have cyclists travelling along behind parked cars, potentially a disaster waiting to happen. Or, if it's not a disaster, it's perceived as definitely not safe, and so people leave their bikes at home and get in the car. The other option is to rethink reversing out into oncoming traffic, instead reintroducing parallel car parking in some streets, such as 8th Street, in lieu of angle parking, and instead accommodating a safe, dedicated cycle lane right beside the footpath, still leaving space for a spreading canopy tree, street lights, and still accommodating shopfront awnings. It's just a suggestion, and we'd really love to hear from you what you think about these. We're also building on the research of many others, including the City of Port Phillip and various other councils, where they've actually not only built new, safe, prioritised roundabouts, they've formally evaluated their new roundabout to gauge how that has worked for improving safety and indeed popularity of these roundabouts for cyclists. A key message through the consultation process, particularly from actual cyclists and those who would really love to be cyclists, is roundabouts are a disaster waiting to happen. We've taken that feedback on board, we've applied the best experience and the best research and the best design from around the traps, and this is what we're proposing. Something for you to think about. I mentioned briefly before, we've revisited the existing bus routes, which is on the left of your screen, and the consultants assisting us with this project have simply rethought those bus routes with a view to not increasing the actual number of kilometres travelled, but actually filling some of the gaps in service provision that exist at present. For example, currently there is no bus service servicing Sunny Tafe and Latrobe campuses out there on Benetook Avenue, for example. This is a very simple win to achieve, which won't cost the state government or anyone else any more than they're currently subsidising the local. Buses are certainly on the agenda. We won't say any more about that for now, but hopefully electric buses aren't too far down the track. And we have also considered that there might be an way to encourage more people to visit the CBD without bringing their car, such as a punt. And so we've presented these ideas to a councillor briefing back in July. We were hoping to have this project out on exhibition before this, but we're often racing at the start of August. We're inviting your written submissions in response to the draft strategy, and we are now heading for potentially a September-October report to Council with a final strategy based on your feedback. Thank you very much.